Hi guys, and welcome back to Viable Futures and to part 2 of ARK Invests Big Ideas 2021. In this part, we will cover electric vehicles, autonomous driving, space, 3D printing, and genomics. I would suggest watching part 1 of the video first, and the link to this is in the top right hand of the screen now. So, electric vehicles. In the 2020 report, ARK's introduction to EVs highlighted how analysts got it wrong, and that the adoption of EVs was significantly faster than expected. ARK explained that other forecasting agencies predicted that EV sales would be roughly 6.5 million units in 2024. ARK, however, forecasted that EV sales would be 37 million, 6 times higher. The difference in way of thinking behind these forecasts is what differentiates ARK's approach to the traditional investment manager. In the 2021 report introduction, ARK is sticking with their forecast, saying the Wright's law is holding true, and that EV sales should increase roughly 20-fold from 2.2 million in 2020 to 40 million units in 2025. They have now included a bullet point on the downside risk, which is really whether traditional automakers can transition successfully to electric and autonomous vehicles. It's very easy to think of Tesla here, but Tesla alone will not produce the 40 million units forecast in 2025. I am a Tesla shareholder, and I really want Tesla to succeed. There is something about Tesla being so far ahead than other EV makers which is quite satisfying. However, I really don't think this is good for the industry. I want Tesla to remain ahead, and I think they will. But I also think it is really important for others to catch up, as I think this will move the industry forward faster and accelerate the transition to a sustainable future. Even in the pandemic, electric vehicle sales grew by 33% in 2020, compared to only 16% in 2019, with internal combustion engine vehicles declining. ARK have updated their internal combustion engine versus EV chart, noting that the total cost of ownership for a like-for-like EV dropped below that of the Toyota Camry back in 2019. This chart shows that by 2023, the sticker price of the like-for-like car will be the same. If this is achieved, this will truly put the number one reason people are still reluctant to buy EV cars to bed. This slide notes that in addition to cost, EVs are competing on range and performance, and I want to focus on the text here rather than the chart. It has been said for years that Tesla or new EV companies should be valued more as a tech company than a traditional automotive company. But ARK has identified here that traditional automakers lack the software and electrical engineering talent necessary to succeed. This is a fairly concerning point, and governments and industries are going to have to significantly improve training if we are going to reach our EV potential. ARK have added a slide on battery volumetric density improvements, and really this summarises what Tesla is trying to achieve by integrating the battery into the car's structure. ARK have calculated that cell-to-vehicle designs increases the volumetric density of the battery by 50%, compared to cells that are grouped in modules and then into packs. This is key to lowering the cost of EVs and making them more efficient. On to autonomous ride-hailing. Now, this is an interesting one, and a stunning insight into ARK's views on the Tesla versus Waymo debate. In the introduction, ARK continues with their 2020 estimate that they expect autonomous ride-hailing to reduce the cost of mobility to 1/10 of the average cost of a taxi today. This cost benefit will trigger widespread adoption. ARK have plotted Tesla, Waymo's and Baidu's Apollo system on a chart with steps to solving autonomy on the x-axis and flexibility and scalability on the y-axis. The colour of each bar represents the relative speed in achieving each step. We can see Tesla's approach, using a camera-based system, is slow to achieve the perceiving and predicting steps, and increases to medium solution speed when achieving the driving and deciding steps. Waymo's is fast to achieve the first 2 steps, and slows to medium when achieving the final 2 steps. What this means is that Tesla should take longer than Waymo to solve full autonomy, but Tesla will have a solution that is a lot more flexible and scalable than Waymo in the end. What's really important to note with this step is, assuming both companies started autonomy at the same time, Waymo is going to look like they're further, or should look like they're further ahead than Tesla, but it's really important to bear in mind that their system, although looks more mature, isn't, because it isn't as flexible and it isn't as adaptable as Tesla's solution. This next chart shows that if Tesla launches an autonomous ride-hailing service successfully by 2022, ARK estimates adoption could reach 20% of the market sector by 2025, whereas they only see Waymo or GM's solution will be limited to a 1% adoption in the same period. If Tesla can achieve this, not only will they have won, but they will have smashed the competition. We have seen the autonomy conversations heating up over the past few weeks, with Waymo's CEO saying that Tesla was no competitor at all to Waymo. Watch this space, but my money is firmly on Elon and Tesla here. ARK believes that autonomous ride-hailing platforms could generate more than $1 trillion in operating earnings by 2030. Based on the previous slide, Tesla is positioned to take a significant proportion of this, and I can't see a viable future for Uber and equivalent companies going forward. Now, Orbital Aerospace, and this is a new category in this year's report, and it very much deserves a place. What a year 2020 has been for the space sector. ARK notes that rocket and satellite costs are declining and upending what was once seen as a monopolistic and bureaucratic industry. This paragraph is fantastic in explaining how all these big ideas are interlinked. Thanks to advancements in deep learning, mobile connectivity, sensors, 3D printing, and robotics, costs that have been ballooning for decades are beginning to decline. ARK's research suggests that the orbital aerospace opportunities, including satellite connectivity and hypersonic flight, will exceed $370 billion annually. Global connectivity is what SpaceX is achieving with the Starlink program, and ARK says that roughly 50% of the global population lacks internet connectivity. But with more satellites, cloud computing will go global. The increased demand we talked about earlier with chips and data centers will be directly linked to a sudden, significant increase in the number of people with access to internet. I produced a video on the future of hypersonic travel and the viability of the Virgin Galactic business. The link is on the screen now. Interestingly, ARK does not mention space tourism anywhere in their presentation. Although the share price of Virgin Galactic is still climbing and exploded last week, this report from ARK has further validated my views that unless Virgin Galactic can produce a competitive supersonic point-to-point travel jet soon, the business is not a viable investment for me. We must also remember that many people think Virgin Galactic is going to be included in the ARKX ETF, but if the share price of Virgin Galactic keeps rising at the rate it has been, it won't be viable for ARK to pay that amount for the shares to include it in the ETF. As I mentioned in my video, Boom Technology and SpaceX are my favourites in the hypersonic point-to-point industry. And of course, being a multiplanetary species, well, it's really only SpaceX and I guess NASA taking this seriously. We are going to Mars, and opportunities will open up by getting to Mars. It's unimaginable what this sector is going to look like in the next 20 to 40 or longer years' time. Now, looking at this slide on the cost of reusability, it is clear that access to space is going to be significantly cheaper than it is now. SpaceX's Falcon 9 has already reduced access significantly, with their first stage booster being reused 8 times. The development of Starship will take this a step further, and I expect Starship to be flying on missions in less than 2 years. Fingers crossed for a successful flight of SN9 this week, if it's allowed. Now, SpaceX launched a record of 143 satellites on one rocket into orbit last week, and ARK predicts the number of active satellites is set to grow significantly. Virgin Galactic might not be a favourite of mine, but I see Virgin Orbit as a key player in the smallsat launch. The benefit of Virgin Orbit is that they can take a small payload for a relatively low price into the exact orbit the customer is looking for, compared to them paying a little less to hop on a SpaceX flight, which may not be going to the correct orbit they're looking for. For hypersonic flights, and this slide was another surprise for me, ARK has valued just the private hypersonic flight sector at $270 billion. Their research suggests that of the 4.5 billion passengers flown in 2018, 15% of the flights were over 7 hours, thus making them viable for hypersonic flights. This 15% equates to 680 million passengers, of which 0.4% flew privately. Now this equates to 2.7 million people who, according to ARK's research, would be willing to pay up to $10,000 per flight to save time. This equates to the $270 billion mentioned earlier. Now this is just the private flying sector. The scale of this opportunity is quite mind-blowing for all long-haul flights. And on to 3D printing. Now, I produced a video on 3D printing and desktop metal, and this was a company Chamath Palihapitiya is invested in, the link in the top of the screen. I mentioned in this video that I was surprised that Cathie Wood, ARK Invest, was not invested in desktop metal. So, to provide an update, ARK now is invested, and it's one of their largest positions in the print ETF. In this year's report, ARK summarised the benefits of 3D printing as a sector. 3D printing significantly reduces the time between design and production, shifts power to the designers, and reduces supply chain complexity as a fraction of the cost of traditional manufacturing. ARK believes 3D printing will revolutionise manufacturing, growing at an annual rate of roughly 60% per year, from $12 billion last year to $120 billion in 2025. I won't go into any more detail on this, as ARK haven't really updated anything further since I published my video. Now on to long-read sequencing. Okay, so this is where we get into the genomics. I gave a summary of the genomics sector in a previous video, link again in the top right. Even though this Big Ideas presentation is a summary, it does go into good detail. I'll produce another video in the future which builds on this, as I fully need to get my head around this first. But referring to my earlier video, this section of genomics, the sequencing, is the detection phase. It's this sequencing that is the driving force behind the genomics revolution, and ARK is betting that the advancements in long-read sequencing are going to revolutionise the sector. This image of the spectrum of short-read sequencing to long-read sequencing highlights some of the companies ARKG is invested in. On the top, we have the YouTube famous BNGO, and ARK notes that historically researchers had to choose between the accuracy of short-read sequencing or the comprehensiveness, but the less accurate, long-read sequencing. With the cost and accuracy of long-read sequencing falling dramatically, ARK believes that long-read sequencing analytics are superior for many sequencing applications, such as paediatric cancers, many rare diseases, and hereditary diseases. ARK believes that this long-read sequencing market will grow at an annual rate of 82% through to 2025. Multi-cancer screening is a new big idea from ARK. This one is very exciting, mainly because of the number of people I know that have died from cancer that could, based on this technology, have possibly been saved, if this technology was more affordable and more advanced. ARK's research suggests that the convergence of innovative technologies that is pushing the cost of multi-cancer screening down 20-fold from $30,000 in 2015 to $1,500 today. They expect it to drop another 80% to $250 by 2025. As a result, the multi-cancer screening market should scale to $150 billion in the US and could avert 66,000 cancer deaths per year, saving 1.4 million human life years. Based on a single blood test, multi-cancer screening can detect dozens of early-stage cancers, including the dangerous metastatic cancers, which, although only account for 17% of cases, causes 55% of deaths. We are now approaching a reimbursable price point where nearly all age groups above 40 could be screened for cancer cost effectively. The final big idea is cell and gene therapy generation 2. Here, ARK have identified that these second generation therapies should shift from liquid to solid tumours, which is the curing of solid mass tumours, which forms the majority of diagnosed cancer cases. Autologous and allogeneic cell therapies, which is where patient cells are modified rather than donated cells, and also ex vivo to in vivo gene editing. And this is where gene editing will occur in the body rather than modifying a patient's cell outside the body and then transplanting back in. Now this chapter is probably the biggest idea and the furthest away from being viable, but ARK believes that this sector could create $250 billion in incremental revenues. And this concludes ARK Invest's Big Ideas 2021 report. I did skim over some ideas more than others and did miss out delivery drones totally. I hope this summary was useful, and I'll be delivering a deeper dive into some of these sectors in future videos. I was so impressed with this report, and it's clear that ARK and its analysts are thinking long term. We must keep listening to Kathy and her team, and I think they have a real grip on what our future looks like. Now, thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.